Been telling these people, the people that are closest to him, the people have heard all of his words, breathed the same air he's breathed, eaten the same food he's eaten, slept on the same ground he slept on. These people, he's been telling them at least 2 times we know of from the Gospel of Mark. He's looked them in the eye and said, the Son of Man must suffer many things. It's not an unfortunate byproduct of his mission. It actually is his mission. Jesus has looked at his best friends and said, I must suffer many things and I must be killed. Twice he has said that. We're going to get to the 3rd time today here at the end of Mark. And he's going to give us a little bit more than he has so far. He's going to give some details as to what this vague suffering entails, and he's actually going to explain why. So look with me in Mark chapter 10. I'll start reading in verse 33. He looks at his best friends and says, we are going up to Jerusalem. And the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and to the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles. And verse 34 gets kind of graphic here. Who will mock him and spit on him, flog him and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. Now, I don't know what you feel about as you read Jesus explain what his experience is willingly walking into Jerusalem, knowing he will be spit on, mocked, flogged, and murdered. And he is explaining this now in graphic, violent detail to his friends. And he also explains that the Jews are going to reject and abuse him, the chief priests, teachers of the law, and the Gentiles, which means everyone else, are going to reject and abuse him. So he will be immune from abuse from nobody. How would you feel if your beloved mentor for a couple years had just told you this? Well, how would you react? Would you say, no. Look, we've seen you raise people from the dead. We've seen you do amazing things, give sight to the blind, and heal people that have been hurt for their whole life. You can do anything. Now, you don't have to go through the mocking and the spitting and the flogging, and you don't have to. Why would you? Would some of you feel like that? I think I would, maybe. How some of his friends respond to Jesus, one, repeating for a 3rd time what he's about to do, and then going into some graphic detail about how violent it's going to be and how humiliating it's going to be and how massive it's going to be. 2 of his best friends have this response to him in verse 35. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. That's crazy, isn't it? Who would respond like that after just hearing what Jesus told them? These aren't strangers. These are the guys that have been with him day in and day out. And they said, after hearing their beloved mentor is going to go through awful things, we'd like you to do something for us. We have a favor. That seems completely out of place, doesn't it? It's obvious from that what Jesus is trying to explain is not sinking in, right? The only way you can explain how these 2 intelligent people who were running a successful fishing business could come up with this kind of reaction is not because they're dense or they're dumb. Not that. It's just what everything Jesus is trying to explain is just not registering. No matter how he explains it, it's just not getting through. And what's more fascinating for me is not these guys' response, it's how Jesus responds to them. Verse 36, he asks, what do you want me to do for you? And then they tell him, now I don't have it on the screen, but they say, let us sit at your right hand and the other one at your left in your glory. When you are at the height of your power, we want to be there on the right and the left. And they want power when Jesus is at the height of his. And here's what's been elusive to them. And it's worth asking, is it elusive to us? To me? They don't understand that when Jesus is at the height of his power, Jesus exercises his greatest moment, his greatest power, by giving it up. Not by asserting it, not by taking control, but by giving control away to intentionally abusive people. That's the height of his glory, is the cross. In fact, verse 38 says, you don't know what you are asking. Jesus says, now he gets metaphorical here. He says, can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? In case you're wondering, that's not a literal question. He doesn't have a cup in his hand and saying, this is not what he's talking about. He's not talking about his baptism in the Jordan River by John the Baptist. That's not what he's talking about. It's metaphorical here. So the guys he's talking to get it. This is their language. They completely understand. If I give you a metaphor in our culture, you can complete it. Your mama's words go in one ear and out the other. See, we get that. If you said that phrase back then, they'd have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean it's going in an ear? Doesn't that hurt? They would have the same problem we have when it comes to translating language and metaphors from a different culture, especially 2,000 years ago. So we have to do some work here. The word cup, every time it appears in their culture, their folks get it. We have to do some work. When it's spoken of metaphorically, like it is here, can you drink the cup I'm drinking? What that always refers to, not only in Scripture, but in Hebrew and Greek literature of that time period, whether it's religious or not, is the maximum amount of God's wrath, his rightful wrath on evil. It's wrath. And then when he says baptism, every time those folks talked about it, when they were speaking metaphorically, it always referred to a completely overwhelming experience. That's what baptism means when it is mentioned metaphorically. So Jesus says to these two guys, and to us, do you understand that I am going to go through the overwhelming experience of taking the condemnation, the rightful condemnation for evil and for sin, and I'm going to bear it all on the cross? You want to join me in my glory? By the way, when Jesus was on the cross, was there someone on his right and his left? They didn't ask to be there. But these two are asking for things they don't get. They don't get that the way you win is by losing. The way you triumph is by giving up power. You hand over control to someone else. Untrustworthy people occasionally. Jesus was at the height of his triumph when he was apparently losing. Losing power. Losing life. Losing blood. Losing dignity. Everything. And so he tells them, you do not know what you are asking for. So it's a radical new idea, that the way you win is by losing. That's a completely new idea. Did your teachers teach you that in school? That the way you get ahead is by failing? Did your guidance counselor, as you were plotting your career, teach you that? That the way you advance in life is by surrendering? Is that what your drill sergeant taught you? Is that what your coach taught you? Is that what your dad taught you? Is that what your employer taught you? Does anybody teach that? That the way you advance is by losing. Oh, now some people will come along and say, I have learned a lot through life's failures. Yeah, but nobody's aiming for that, right? I'll take it if it comes and, Lord willing, learn a lesson from it, but I'm not hoping for it. I'm not hoping for rejection or mocking or humiliation or abuse. No, the way we work, the way I work, is the way to influence the world. The way to make a difference is by getting your way. right? Using the resources you have, your looks, your wealth, your intelligence, your social connections. Use what you got to get what you want. Now, the goal is want something noble. Want something that isn't self-serving. But that's how you get ahead. I mean, the Gideons have an agenda. Our church has an agenda. We want to do something. We want to make a difference. How do we do that? How does every organization, every family, every individual, at their nature, what is their default position to get that done? Use your resources, use your intelligence, use your whatever to assert your agenda. That's how you influence people. And what I'm reminded of here in Mark 10 is that the most influential person on the planet's history didn't go about it that way. He didn't assert his agenda by using his resources. How do I know that? Because he had every resource known to any and every imagination. But also listen to this. Christ did not advocate pulling away and just emptying yourself of all of your resources and emptying yourself of your intelligence and avoiding society and avoiding people. He didn't do that either. No. Here's what he said. As he was talking to them right after this metaphor, he said in verse 42, called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over you." You see, you get ahead by getting your way. And Jesus says in verse 43, "Not so with you. Not so with you. Whoever wants to become great among you must become your servant." Jesus' answer to winning influence and gaining trust and making a difference is through substitutionary sacrifice. You want to do something big? You want to make a difference? Empty yourself of your agenda. Go meet the needs of people who can't benefit you. Now, I have a gross illustration, and that's pus. That's gross. I'm sorry. But for medical people, you'll know what I'm talking about. I don't know if you've seen that stuff on your Band-Aid or when you've had an injury, but from now on, I hope when you see it, you'll remember what we're talking about. Every time you see pus, pus is the collection of corpses. They are dead white blood cells who gave their life to kill bacteria or virus so you could live. Did you know that? Every time. Every body, whether it's an animal or whether it's human, is designed to do this. It's encoded in us because God made us that the way you get ahead is through substitutionary sacrifice. The reason you didn't die from the cold you had last week or last month is because of this. Because millions of cells in your body gave their life so you could have it. It's good for us to remember that. And then verse 45, this is how I'll end. Jesus explains why he must suffer, why he must go through the mocking and the spitting and the flogging and the killing. He says, "The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many." He came to be a sacrifice. Now, please hear me, Christians in churches, whether you're listening on a radio or sitting on a couch or you're right here in this pew. Jesus did not come to be an example to follow. Jesus did not come to be an example for us to copy. He did not come to model behavior that we could watch and observe and then plug it in. That's not what following Jesus means. It does not mean copying his behavioral example. How do I know that? Because every founder of every world religion, that is what they came to do. They came to be an example. If you want enlightenment, if you want peace, if you want heaven, if you want whatever, do it my way. That's what Muhammad says. That's what Joseph Smith says. That's what Buddha says. Every founder of every cult or world religion, this is their calling. Watch us, Gandhi. Watch us and do it as closely to our example as you can get, and then you will achieve whatever. And Jesus says, no, I didn't come to be an example. I came to give my life as a ransom. No other founder of any world religion or faith or philosophy has ever said that or will ever say that. Only Christ. He came to be a sacrifice and do what we couldn't do. Because all life-changing love is centered around substitutionary sacrifice. Jesus says, I came to give my life as a ransom for many. And that's supposed to change us. It's supposed to change the way we serve people. How many of you like to help people out? You can all raise your hands. If you're not raising your hand, I know it's just because you're busy doing something. But everyone I've ever met likes to do this on some level. The question is why? Do you like to do it because it makes you feel good about yourself? Makes you feel like you're a good person? You're not too selfish? This is a deep one. It's only you can answer that. What Jesus is teaching us through Mark 10 here is that the only motive for a selfless life is the gospel. It doesn't mean you quit serving people. It means you don't need to serve them to feel good about yourself. You just want to. You want to delight your Savior who died as a ransom for you. You want to bring delight to these people. We did something really cool a few months ago with our Angel Tree ministry. And we gave gifts for that. For families and kids who may not have had gifts otherwise. I love that we did that. So let me ask you this. To be a substitutionary sacrifice means you give from your strength. You don't give from your leftovers. Here's what my family did in light of that truth. We figured out our budget for our Christmas presents for our family, and we took part of those and gave it to kids that we don't know. And my kids got less as a result of that. Sorry, Naya. Sorry, Dax. Sorry, kid. That's the way it happened. Now, we could have done the other way. We could have just done for our kids exactly what we wanted and given our leftovers to them, but that's not substitutionary love. Substitutionary love, sacrifice, means you give from your strength, not your leftovers. When the FCA group in our town came knocking at my door for the canned food drive, did that happen to anybody else not long ago? They did that with me. They said, do you have any canned food? Do you know what my instinct was to do? Yeah, you know what you do. Okay, refried beans, what's the expiration date? It's close, here you go. We've got 9 cans of black beans. Here, you can have one of these. Right? Isn't that what people do? And I was tempted. I got to the pantry and opened it up and had the same thought. And I would say, by a miracle of God, I said no. Because when they came, I was battling a cold. I had just bought 2 cans of Campbell's chicken noodle soup to help me get through this cold. I gave them 3 cans of food, and 2 of them were those cans of chicken noodle soup. They didn't know that. They didn't walk away thinking, that is so nice. I know you, I can tell by your sniffles and your sneezing that was your strength. And they don't know that. But I did. And that is transforming. You may not transform somebody else through your substitutionary sacrifice, but you will be transformed. I know. What if we gave people out of our strength, not our leftovers? What if the church was known for abundantly and gladly giving our time, our encouragement, our whatever, out of our strength and not our leftovers? Would that give glory to the substitutionary sacrifice of our Savior? It only happens if you're transformed by His substitutionary sacrifice.